What We Pretend We Can't See by Gyzym. Chapter 8. For a disorienting, half-awake second, Harry thinks he's at number 12 somehow. He's grown so used to the crack of creature entering and exiting those rooms that to hear it here now disrupts his sense of place. Then he realizes that creature's crying. He jerks upright, throwing the covers back, abruptly aware that he's in his own apartment and there's only one reason Creature would come here like this. Creature? What's happened? Right now?
The thieves,
Creature sobs, barely intelligible.
They are haunting the house that took Master Draco's wand in.
Harry doesn't wait for the rest of the sentence, just grabs his own wand out from under his pillow and apparates directly from his bed to Criminal Place's front gate. His feet land on cool grass. He remembers that he's barefoot in pajamas in the same moment that he notices he's managed to touch down on the lawn. Either Draco's rekeyed the wards to let Harry apparate in, or the intruders have taken them down entirely. God, Harry hopes it's the first thing. He shudders to think of what someone could have done to the old house, to Draco, if they've taken down all the wards. Draco's told him a little about the complicated web of spells that makes up Grimmauld Place's security. All Harry's really taken away is that it's an ancient and crotchety, and has had so much magical energy poured into it over the years that there'd probably be a fairly massive explosion if it was to be dissolved all at once.
But no one could do that,
Draco said, rolling his eyes when Harry pointed this out.
And even if they did, of course there wouldn't be an explosion. It's all tied in with the, "Oh, look, Potter, can't you just accept that you are woefully underinformed and live in blissful ignorance like any decent person would do? You don't have to be Aura Potter every second of the day, you know, and I, for one, wish you wouldn't. He's really very obnoxious." Harry let himself be talked out of further inquiries by the alarmingly intense allure to the idea of not being Aura Potter all the time. He thinks that's going to be a pretty fucking cold comfort, though, if this night ends with the house, with Draco scattered in pieces across the lawn. There's an ear-splitting crash, and then he hears Draco scream, either in rage or in pain, from one of the upper floors. Harry runs. The front door is shut. Harry slashes his wand furiously across the air in front of him, and it isn't anymore, slamming back just in time for him to burst through. He takes it 2 stairs at a time, trying to think tactically, trying not to panic. There's too many floors, too many rooms. That scream could have come from anywhere above the first floor, and Harry doesn't have time to search them all, and he realizes all at once that he has stepped on a biting stair, and it is not biting him. Harry looks down, shocked into a split second of stillness. He knows it's the right stair. The sign is standing up on its little stick right next to his foot and everything. And Harry wonders if the house is trying to work with him, the way it did in the kitchen the morning before. Feeling a little crazy and not caring, too desperate and frantic to care, Harry closes his eyes and whispers, "Help me, please. Show me where they've got him." Then he opens his eyes. He sees that sconces are flickering on, one after another, in a long and inarguable path down the hall. Harry runs. His heartbeat is loud in his chest, in his ears. There is no damage on this floor, wasn't on the first either, as far as Harry could tell. The museum in the exact pristine condition it was when Harry left it the day before, and it's chilling. Strangely. Harry thinks it's more unsettling than carnage would be. Whatever's happening tonight, intruders have clearly taken a more targeted approach, and while that might turn out to be better for the house, Harry knows too well it means the worst for Draco. No good can come from being in the path of highly focused thieves, especially ones as extensively trained as the 2, possibly 3, who escaped them last time. The house guides him to the stairwell up to Draco's private floor. Harry draws in a deep breath before he takes his first step through the doorway, not sure if he's hoping for the wards to be down or not. On one hand, there's a potential explosive disaster to think about, but on the other hand, Harry doesn't have time to force his mind through a barrage of distracting thoughts, reasons he should be elsewhere. Both turn out to be baseless concern. Harry feels the magic of the ward slide over him and then blinks, surprised, when they let him through. He's not sure if that was the house helping him out or if Draco. "I won't!"
Draco's voice sharp with distress. Harry turns around, the sound with his whole body, not needing the sconces anymore, running up the stairs and down the hall towards it at a dead sprint.
I already told you I won't, and I mean it. I'll die first. I'd rather die.
You never could figure out when to keep your fool mouth shut, could you, Mr. Malfoy? A cool voice, unfamiliar but known, too, in a way Harry can't quite quantify. There is, of course, a perfectly feasible version of this plan where that's exactly what happens to you. I did all this out of the kindness of my heart, you see, to avoid that tragic outcome. But if you really won't cooperate, I'm afraid I'll have no choice but to die bloodily. Harry snarls and throws open Draco's bedroom door. Draco is pinned to the wall, suspended about half a foot off the floor, his captor, glamored average build and height, not either of the intruders from last time, standing below him with a wand to his throat. Draco's arms and legs are bound in ropes that's clearly been attached to the wall with a sticking charm, and Harry aches to see that its wrists are red and raw already, shaved from what must be an unbearably uncomfortable hold. How long had Creature waited to come get him? How long has Draco been in here, being subjected to this? There's a long, thin cut bleeding sluggishly across his right cheekbone, a bruise already forming at the edge of his jaw, another at his temple, where somebody probably cold-cocked him, Harry realizes, so enraged for a second that he can't think, can't move. He just stares at Draco, breath coming heavy, and watches the wide-eyed look of surprise, horror, panic flicking across his face as he turns toward the sound of Harry's voice. "Harry!" Draco shouts, but Harry's already seen the warning in his expression. He rips around just in time to see the guy sneaking up behind him, wand raised. Harry casts a stunning spell with his wand hand and punches out hard with the other. The curse misses, but the punch lands in the center of the guy's throat, and he staggers, choked. Harry uses his distraction to cast a body bind, and then, when he realizes that this is the slight guy from the first break-in, throws a conjunctivitis curse in for good measure. He hopes it fucking hurts. There's a strangled, breathless cry from Draco, and when Harry turns, it's to see his captor hitting him for the second time, hard in the stomach. Harry doesn't even cast. He just waves his wand and steps forward, an intent, menacing advance, and the man flies away from Draco, slams against the nearest wall so hard the windows rattle in their frames. Harry grins, a vicious, unfriendly one, slashes his wand in Draco's direction without looking around to cut his bonds clear of the wall, bears down on this filthy, foul excuse for a man who has been hurting Draco, who must pay. Harry holds his wand underneath the man's throat, a purposeful imitation of the position in which he just had Draco, and jams it in hard enough that the man gasps, watering eyes visible even through the glamour. "And how the fuck do you like it?" Harry yells an inch from his face. He lowers his voice, digs the wand into the flesh of his neck even harder. "Because I'll tell you what, mate. This is the least of your worries right now. You should be thanking your lucky fucking stars for this moment, because this moment, this is the least your life is going to suck for a long, long time. I hear Azkaban's a real hellhole. Now the Dementors are gone, nothing to keep scum like you from turning on each other." He pauses, thoughtful. "Maybe we should carve up your face, too. What do you think? Write me first on your forehead, for when you get there?" "Potter!" Draco gasps, and Harry stops talking, but doesn't look away from his prisoner. "Not that I don't appreciate the sentiment, but you won't be the only one let off in chains if your team shows up and finds you engaging in aura brutality." "I didn't call the team," Harry snaps. He wants to hurt this man, wants to make him do more than just choke and splutter for air. He wants every inch of the pain Draco suffered delivered unto his snivelling, sorry, excuseful person, and he wants to be the one to give it to him, wants to hit him and hex him until he is too battered and broken to lay a hand on someone else ever again. But then Draco's hand is on his shoulder, warm, alive. Harry can feel the ropes that are still tied around Draco's wrist thumping gently against his back. "This isn't you," Draco says softly into Harry's ear. When Harry snarls out an incoherent noise of very firm disagreement, Draco tightens his grip, his voice going sharp.
I swear to every god, Harry, if I have to watch you mope around for the rest of your life because you snapped and maimed someone, I may just finish what this hideous little home invader started. This isn't you. You're not going to hurt him. You're going to take him in. Say it.
It's the use of Harry's first name that breaks through the cloud of rage blurring his visions, his judgment. It startles him, and then he started all over again to realize it's the second time Draco's used it. He shouted it, too, when he saw the other intruder nearly get a drop on him. Harry wants this guy to bleed, wants it so badly that his fists and his chest and his teeth hurt. But he wants him to bleed for Draco, and that is not what Draco wants. I'm not, Harry forces out through gritted teeth, going to hurt him. I'm going to take him in.
Very good,
says Draco, and let's go. Slowly, Harry lowers his wand from the guy's throat. Not far, just far enough to cast another body bind, make sure the little fuck can't go running off. The man coughs for a minute, and then he smiles at Draco over Harry's shoulder. Says, "Why, thank you, Mr. Malfoy. What an unexpectedly merciful spirit you've got." There's a ringing pause, and then,
"Do you know what?"
says Draco, voice flat and unyieldingly cold.
"One punch couldn't hurt."
Harry hits the man so hard his own hand hurts. So hard he can't quite control his follow-through, scrapes his knuckles raw on the edge of the window frame, just next to his face. It's worth it. For the sound he makes, for the blood he spits out of his mouth, but for the satisfied little sigh from Draco most of all.
"Tell me what the fuck you've been doing here," Harry growls low, "right now."
"Harry, Harry," says the man, and there it is again. Harry knows he's never heard this voice before, but he can't shake the sense that he's talked to the person underneath the shimmer of the glamour, knows him somehow. "You're really not very good at this, are you? I know you don't have backup coming, and you've already played the rest of your hand. Poor child, it's not your fault. All you ever knew was brute force and dogged persistence, wasn't it? You weren't supposed to be an Auror. You weren't supposed to live long enough." Harry doesn't really care about any of this. Could give a shit about some criminal spitting up painful truth that Harry himself accepted long ago. But Draco snaps.
"You shut the fuck up right now, or I'll let him murder you. There's a lovely spot in the back garden where we could bury a body. No one would ever know."
"Oh, this is interesting." Their captive breathes, looking to Draco and then back at Harry, a speculative expression on his false features. "Harry, you're not even wearing shoes. What, did you apparate straight from your bed to answer the call? And Mr. Malfoy, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were more concerned with Harry Potter's feelings than you are with exacting revenge. It's hardly very Slytherin, is it? Most damning, boys, most damning, no matter which way you slice it."
"How's this for Slytherin?"
Draco says, voice raised a little, the edge of hysteria in it.
"Shut up and answer his fucking questions, or I'll kill you myself."
"You know," says the man, "I don't think I will." "Oh, you will," Harry says. "Or if you don't, your friend in the hall with the crushed windpipe will. Well, it'll probably be a while before he can talk. Maybe you can write it all down on a piece of paper for us or something, because when I take you in, you won't be taking either one of us in," says the man, very calm. "That," says Harry, "is so very wrong." But before he can say anything further, the man yells, "It's now, Em!" and headbutts Harry hard in the forehead. Harry takes the hit with all the grace his training's taught him, falling back only the barest half step, but that half step's enough. The man vanishes, smiling into thin air, nothing left of him but the telltale whoosh of a recently departed portkey. Harry swears, runs out into the hall, and finds his compatriot is gone too, probably by the same mechanism. A portkey worn close to the skin, the strategy favored by highly trained wizard assassins who want a backdoor exit if they get picked up on the scene of a hit. "God Fucking damn it! Harry yells, loud enough that his voice reverberates down the halls. He should have seen it. He should have anticipated it. The portkey, but he didn't because he's not smart enough, not good enough. They're gone again and it's Harry's fault. Draco's not safe here. Harry had the chance to keep him safe and he missed it. He fucked it up. He fucked it up and let the bastards go, and he should have killed him. Killed them both. It would have been worth whatever the fuck it cost him. And Harry wheels around to punch a wall and stops. Remembers all at once that it's not the wall's fault, that he'd be hurting the house, which helped him, which he's only ever done wrong by before. That he would be hurting Draco. It takes everything in him, but he unclenches his fist, places his palm flat against the wall instead, tries to imagine he can feel the current of the house's magic pulsing underneath the whirls of his fingertips. He takes deep, steadying breaths and waits for Draco to say whatever he's going to say. Something pithy about how Harry's clearly deranged, probably, but isn't it nice that he's developed a rudimentary grasp of basic self-control? Nothing comes. Harry looks up and realizes that Draco isn't next to him. That Draco is still in the bedroom. That there are frenetic-sounding little crashes coming from the bedroom. That Harry still doesn't know what caused the massive crash he heard outside. That Harry is being selfish. He shakes himself, drops his hand, and goes in after Draco. The answer to what caused the crash he heard outside is apparent immediately. Harry doesn't know how the hell he didn't notice it before. The far wall of the room has been blown clean through. All that remains is debris, a few determinedly clinging wooden panels, and a gaping hole leading into what must be the master bathroom. Harry can't believe that a month ago he was talking about someone doing this like it wouldn't matter, like it would be fine. The hole is more than just a hole, visibly and palpably, and he feels dizzy for a second to look at it. Sick. He thinks that maybe he wasn't imagining it a minute ago, that feeling of magic pulsing under his fingertips. Maybe the house is bleeding, the only way it knows how. Certainly, Harry feels, standing here in this room, the pervasive creeping sense of dread he associates with hospitals and battlefields. Busts gone very wrong. This is a wound, and a grievous one. Harry's chest hurts just looking at it. Of course, then he lays eyes on Draco, and thinks that first bout of chest pain was nothing. Harry thought he got swept up in the moment, Draco's hand on his shoulder, the way he said, "Harry, this isn't you," in the calm, collected voice. He got swept up in Draco's whole thing. He seems so in control most of the time, like he's got everything figured out, or at least like he's got so much more figured out than Harry that it might as well be everything, and whatever he doesn't have quite managed is just a wash. Harry knows, he has always known, that it's maybe a bit of a facade. Draco's not quite as good at it as he thinks, and Harry sees the cracks sometimes. Notes them. In some ways he's been looking for them since he was 11, so it's not like the fact that they're there is really a surprise. He forgot, is all. He forgot, or maybe never truly let himself recognize, that the reason Draco puts it up in the first place is that what's underneath is the same deep well that fuels his endless talking, his endless research, the way he went and stood on a sidewalk in Muggle London and wriggled like a fish for 2 days out of sheer determination to find something everyone else abandoned long ago. Draco is intense and incessant, full stop, and Harry knows that, has known it for weeks now, but it hadn't occurred to him to push that thought to its logical conclusion, to think about what it must be like sometimes inside of that forever babbling brain. It's occurring to him now, though. He can't seem to make it stop. Draco's shaking, visibly, badly. The ropes are still trailing from his ankles and wrists. He is flitting from drawer to cabinet to dresser to nightstand, opening doors and pulling things out at random, tossing them aside, moving to another spot and starting again. He's looking for something. He's gasping for breath. He's heavily favoring his left side. "Malfoy," Harry says. "Oh," Draco says. He turns and his eyes are wild, narrowing dangerously. He always does try to hurt when he's hurting.
"Oh, are you done now? I'm sorry I couldn't attend to your little breakdown. I'm a bit busy in here. It turns out it's very difficult to find things by hand, and seeing as they took my wand—" "What are you looking for?" Harry says. "I don't need your help," Draco cries. And it's such an obvious lie, so utterly transparent, that it's all Harry can do not to go over to him and call him on it. The only thing that holds him back is knowing how desperately Draco wants to believe that it's true. Harry can't bear, after all of this, to be the one to force him to admit that it's not. "I need the potion. I need my wand. Here," Harry says and holds out his own. Draco stares at the wand, stares at Harry, stalks over and rips the thing out of his hand, snaps, "Accio, draught of peace," and then louder, "Accio, draught of peace," and then in a voice so thready and badly concealing desperation that Harry nearly snatches the wand back rather than see it disappoint him. "Accio, draught of peace." Nothing happens. Draco makes a horrible, high-pitched, keening noise, drops the wand, backs up until he hits the wall opposite the hole, and slides to the floor. "They took it again," he says. His voice has a quality to it that Harry has never heard before. He talks fast sometimes, often, but not like this. Right now, Draco sounds like he's taking in too much air and not enough. The words tumbling out from between his lips, breathy and too close together. Each one of them an obvious choking hazard. "They took it again! Potter, what the fuck kind of thieves are these? Who does this to someone? Why would you go out of your way to— Are they just sadists? Is that all it comes down to, or is this personal? Do they just hate me that much I can't breathe? He stops, his gaze fixing on the hole where the wall once was, and his breathing picks up too much for him to even speak. Harry realizes that he's having a panic attack. Hermione used to sometimes over really big homework assignments, and in the Forest of Dean. Harry used to sometimes in moments when nothing much was happening, after the war was over. Ron usually dealt with Hermione's, and Harry usually dealt with his own, which is to say he mostly didn't deal with them, just gasped and cried and threw things, and then afterwards cleaned it all up in silent, empty-feeling misery and went about his day. Still, he knows the territory, an important thing. Harry thinks is that he himself remain calm. Somebody has to be calm here. Somebody has to show Draco how. Harry hesitates for only a moment, and then crouches down in front of Draco, settles his weight on his knees. "You can breathe," he says, and then, when this has no effect, considers what approach Draco might try on him and adds, "You idiot." This, too, does nothing when Harry says, "Malfoy." Draco doesn't even look around. Harry can hear the labor in his every inhalation, the work it's taking him just to get a little air, and the urgency of the situation overrides Harry's desperate grasping for what he's supposed to do. His fear of getting it wrong pushes him back onto his instincts, which, anyway, is really where he belongs. "Draco," Harry says. Draco's eyes snap to his. They're too wide, brimming with panic, and they move to look back at the hole almost immediately. Harry moves too, his whole body to keep himself in Draco's eye line, to get in Draco's way. "Draco," he says again. It's the gentlest voice he can come up with, but it mostly sounds like a rasp. As hushed and hurting as the rest of the room, he keeps going anyway. "Look at me, okay? Don't look at that. Look at me. Can you do that?" Slowly, without breaking eye contact, Draco nods. "Okay," Harry says. "Okay." He thinks for a second, and then reaches out and picks up one of Draco's hands. Draco draws in a breath as he does that hitches so horribly that Harry has to bite down on the winds. Then Draco's eyes fix on the rope around his wrists, and Harry has to say it again. "Draco, don't look at that. Look at me. Stay right here with me, okay?" He thinks about asking Draco to say it, the way Draco had asked him to say he wasn't going to hurt his fucking torturer. It helped Harry, but he's not sure they need the same things. Anyway, he doubts Draco could get it out. He trusts his instincts. He takes Draco's hand and presses it, holds it to his own chest. He keeps himself in Draco's eyeline, and he draws in deep, even breaths, releases them steady and slow. He waits for Draco to follow. "This isn't going to work, Potter," Draco chokes out. Harry does not point out that it's working already, that a minute ago Draco couldn't even find it in himself to speak
because that's not what this is about. He just keeps breathing, and after another minute, Draco manages to say, "Get out." He sounds like he means it, but his fingers betray him, closing around Harry's pajama top in a white-knuckled grip. "No," Harry says a little helplessly. He couldn't leave Draco here like this if Draco wanted him to, and anyway, Harry knows that he doesn't. "I won't." Draco makes a strangled little sound that might be the ghost of a laugh. Harry can't tell. "I don't want you to see this," he gasps, and Harry's heart breaks for him a little, that he's still this unbearably proud person, even now. "I'm sorry," Harry whispers and means it, "but I'm staying." Adds, in case it'll help, "I'll let you obliviate me afterwards, if you want." With a noise like a wounded animal, Draco capitulates. He rocks forward, makes as if he wants to curl in on himself, and Harry moves without thinking, so his head hits Harry's shoulder instead. Harry lifts the hand he isn't using to hold Draco's wrist to rest on Draco's back, and he feels Draco's free hand wrap around his bicep. His fingers are digging in a little too hard, but Harry doesn't mind. Harry would probably let him do a lot worse than this if it meant he'd be all right. Neither one of them says anything for a long time. Draco chokes and grasps for breath, hyperventilates, and Harry forces himself to keep his own breathing even, measured. He runs the flat of his palm up and down Draco's back, tries to will it to stop heaving under his hand with slow, deliberate strokes. He's never done anything like this before, not for anyone. Ginny asked him to hold her once after a nightmare, but she'd just been a bit unsettled and was asleep again in about 45 seconds, so Harry doesn't think it counted. This is awful, Harry thinks, and better than doing nothing, and strange above all else. He didn't know his body could contain this many warring feelings, concerns and sorrow and helplessness thick in his throat, even as he thinks that his knees hurt and notices that Draco's hair smells faintly of soap. It's probably about 15 minutes. It feels like 15 years. When finally Draco's breathing starts to even out, he uses the hand he's got on Harry's chest to shove him backwards away. Harry nods, understanding, even though he can see that Draco's eyes are closed, and busies himself with untying the knotted ropes around Draco's wrists and ankles. It's more laborious than Harry expected it to be. It's thick rope, coarse. It's no wonder it rubbed his skin raw. When he finishes and looks up, Draco is looking back at him. And the expression on his face is so... Harry has never seen him like this, completely open, a raw nerve. He knows that's because Draco's never wanted him to see it and probably doesn't want him to now. Harry should look away, but he can't. He can't because what's sketched out plain as day for Harry to see is misery, sure, and resignation, but also, unmistakably, affection. Incredulous, disbelieving affection. Like Harry is a mirage that has appeared before Draco in the desert, but affection all the same. Somehow the single most captivating thing Harry's ever seen. He couldn't break Draco's gaze if he tried. It's Draco who drops his eyes after a minute, mouth pulling into a strange, unreadable shape, and Harry at long last takes his weight off his knees. He folds himself down into a more comfortable position on the hardwood floor, and wondrously banishes the rope. "Do you want to obliviate me?" Harry says at last. Draco gives him a long considering look and then slowly shakes his head. "Okay," Harry says, like he wouldn't have minded either way, but secretly very relieved. "Do you want me to heal you?" Draco makes a face at him, which Harry chooses to interpret as meaning not yet. "Okay," Harry says. "Do you want some tea?" At this, Draco actually laughs, though it comes out vaguely wheezing, pained. "Of all things, I never would have pegged you as Potter. A feeder is pretty high on the list." Smiling slightly, glad, if nothing else, that Draco has not abandoned forever all power of speech, Harry shrugs. "Everybody has to eat, Malfoy. Come on." "Oh," Draco says and frowns. "What if you brought me the tea?" Harry hates to say it when Draco's so obviously not in a state to do much more than sit in a heap, but... "I don't, sorry, but
I don't know that you should be in here by yourself just now. Oh, Draco says. He nods a slow, distant sort of movement. Yeah, that's probably right. Harry stands, picks up his wand, helps Draco up, keeps himself firmly between Draco and the agonized, horrible hole in his house, turns him around, guides him out into the hall. You need St. Mungo's, Harry says after about 6 steps. Draco's still favoring his left side, heavily, enough that Harry's afraid to step more than a few inches away, his hands hovering nervously in the place he thinks Draco looks most likely to fall. The bruising on his face alone is a horror show, and Harry doesn't want to think about the injuries his pajamas must be concealing, what they might have done to Draco in the time it took Harry to show up. I don't take medical advice from people who aren't wearing shoes, says Draco, still distant. Contact me again when you're properly attired. Harry makes a face at the back of his head that he's glad Draco can't see. He's not sure what it must look like. He knows he's never made it before. At least let me... Shh, Draco says. Harry shuts up, if only because it's the only time Draco's ever missed an opportunity to tell him viciously and actively to shut up, and Harry thinks that probably means something. Just trails Draco down the hall, down the stairs, which is nerve-wracking to say the least, and into the little sitting room with the wet bar. When Draco can't sit down without gasping, Harry's patience wears thin and he snaps, Malfoy, for fuck's sake! It'll take me 2 seconds! Draco hesitates and then nods, wary, waves a hand. The vague permission is all Harry needs, and he spells the blood off Draco's face, casts a couple of pain relief charms that he learned early on in his career, mostly from the field aurors who'd come over the years to rely on them. They're only a stopgap. They're not really fixing the problem, but they give Draco a couple of hours at least to gather himself back together before he submits to the indignity of being seen by an actual professional. You still need St. Mungo's, Harry says, because he does. You know what I've always imagined about you, Draco says, closing his eyes, is that you're the kind of horrifyingly stubborn imbecile who won't go to a hospital even if one of his bones is visible. I'm right, aren't I? You'd rather bleed to death in an alley, probably, than just go to a healer and admit you're made of flesh like everyone else. Harry's not really sure what Draco's getting out of turning it around on him like this, but hey, it's not the same when it's me. Why not? Draco's eyes are still closed. His voice is very neutral. Because I don't feel like this when it's me. Harry doesn't say it. He thinks it. The truth of it scrabbles wild, dangerous inside of his chest. But he doesn't say it. It doesn't make enough sense right now for him to admit it out loud. Because I'm not made of flesh like everyone else, Harry says. I'm a very convincing hologram. Draco doesn't open his eyes, but his brow does furrow a bit. What on earth is a hologram? A muggle thing, Harry says. It's such an incredible, bizarre topic in the circumstances that he almost laughs. Like television sort of, except more solid, I guess. You have seen a television before, right? Of course I've seen a television, Draco says. He's still neutral. No, Harry realizes, not neutral. Flat. Effectless. It's awful. Pansy has too. I'm not sure I see the appeal. Harry says. He thinks about it, and then, because he thinks Draco would be honest with him if their places were reversed, he says, well, actually they're pretty great for moments like these. Distracting, you know. Says Draco. More of a hum than a word. Perhaps I get one for next time. There isn't going to be a next time, Harry says, trying to sound soothing, and not like the thought of this happening again makes him want to set things on fire, and Draco's eyes open. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Potter. Of course there's going to be a next time, he snaps. It's nice to hear a bit of tone coming back into his voice, even if that tone is somewhere between withering and full up with abject despair. They didn't get what they wanted, and as I'm sure you overheard, they're perfectly happy to murder me for it. Maybe it's silly to buy the television after all. He adds, voice going scathing, bitter. Seeing as I probably won't live long enough to use it. Nobody is murdering anyone, Harry says, too harsh. The very idea sending a flare of white-hot fury down his spine. Then he catches the sight of Draco's trembling hands and takes a deep breath. Tries again for soothing, for calm.
Look, we'll put a detail on the door again and—"
"Oh, what, for another week?"
Draco sneers at him, eyes hard.
"Well, isn't that lovely? A few days to get my affairs in order. I'll own my solicitor. I'm sure he'll be thrilled." "I'll say then,"
Harry says. The words come out of his mouth unbidden, but it's what he wants. He knows it the minute he hears it. He doubts now that he thinks about it, that he could find it within himself to leave Draco here alone.
"You said yourself that there's plenty of rooms. I'll stay until it's done."
Draco's mouth, which was open around whatever inevitable diatribe he meant to come next, snaps closed. He blinks at Harry, inscrutable for a long moment, and then says in a voice smaller and stranger than Harry has ever heard him use.
"Potter, you can't,"
Harry says.
"I'm what was it? A grown man in the prime of my life. I can do whatever I like."
"But," Draco says a little helplessly,
I can't ask you to."
"You're not asking," Harry says. He offers Draco a crooked smile, a little shrug.
"I'm offering. I want to."
Draco's mouth opens slightly and then closes again. It looks like maybe he needs a minute with that, so Harry walks over to the wet bar, wondering if it will provide him with tea. He doesn't really relish the thought of letting Draco out of his sight just now. He puts his hand down on the smooth wooden surface, closes his eyes, and thinks hard about a kettle, 2 cups, and some tea bags. When he opens them, 2 steaming mugs of butterbeer are sitting in front of him instead. Harry grins at them, delighted. They're a much better idea than the tea was.
"I suppose it would get you out of that hovel you insist on calling a home," Draco says, "temporarily at least."
Harry rolls his eyes at the butterbeer. Typical. But hey, if acting like he's the one doing Harry the favor is what gets the job done, then so be it. "Sure, Malfoy," he says, carrying their mugs across the room. He hands one of them to Draco, ignoring his raised eyebrow at how very much it isn't tea, and sits down in the chair he's come to think of as his own with the other. "Maybe it'll even force me to see the folly of my ways, find someplace better, lead by example and all that."
"Stop humoring me,"
Draco snaps. He sounds genuinely angry for a second, but when Harry glances at him, the emotion drains out of his face, leaves him looking nothing more than when tired. He takes a long sip of his butterbeer and sighs.
"Look, I know, you saw. I'm aware that I'm not exactly doing well in this moment."
"So?" says Harry.
"So,"
Draco spits, like it's costing him money.
"You're an insufferable Gryffindor lunatic with a borderline clinical incapability of leaving well enough alone. You like to save people, Potter. It's your whole thing. I will admit, because I don't have much of a choice, that I need—"
Draco stops, pale, swallows hard, continues, voice uneven, after a moment.
"I'll admit that it would be better for right now if you were here. But what I will not have, what I flatly refuse to allow, is this mollycoddling."
He gives Harry a severe look over the rim of his butterbeer, which Harry is not planning on telling him is quite a bit less intimidating than he's clearly intending. What with the cut on his cheek and the bruises blooming across his jaw and temple and all.
"You will talk to me like you usually do, or you will not talk to me at all,"
Draco declares, and then, clearly as an afterthought, adds,
"You horrible one-man sort of self-preservation and sense."
"I thought I was a savior complex in ill-fitting trousers," says Harry mildly after a moment. Draco huffs out a faint laugh.
"That too."
"Well," Harry says, "in that case, fuck you, Malfoy." Draco sighs and seems to relax, his body sinking into the cushions of his chair.
"Thank you, Potter."
He reaches for the pocket of his pyjama bottoms, pats around for a moment, and then scowls so intensely that Harry startles a little.
Creature
appears with a crack. Before I can even say anything, Draco says,
"Good, yes, hello. If you could get me my spare wand from the—"
He trails off, his eyes fixed with horror in the same place that Harry's are, on the large, angry-looking lump sticking out of the top of Creature's head. That answers the question of why Creature hadn't come to get Harry immediately, at least. They must have cold-cocked him, too, to keep him from defending the house. Harry's not surprised that he didn't see the injury in the darkness of his bedroom, but he's furious and wishes he had known. He wouldn't have waited around to go after Draco, of course. He doesn't think he would have been capable of it, but he'd have summoned or gone looking for Creature before now if he'd known he was hurt.
Oh, Creature,
Draco says, sounding sick. He reaches out like he's going to try and touch the lump, and Creature shies away, quivering with pain little noises.
No, if you just let me see, one of us can heal it for you.
Creature does not deserve healing.
Creature sobs, collapsing into a heap on the ground.
Creature allowed this to happen. Creature was laying asleep on the floor while thieves were upstairs blowing holes in the house while thieves were upstairs hurting Master Draco.
He lets out a long hiccuping wail and adds at the top of his voice,
Master Draco should throw Creature into the well.
Draco says, clearly nonplussed.
I don't want to throw into the well, Creature.
It's not your fault, Harry adds, because he's dealt with the hysterical, guilt-riddled house elf a time or two in his days. You got them sometimes at the higher-end crime scenes, and also, though it pains Harry even now to think of it, Dobby had been an education. You weren't asleep. They hit you. They knocked you out.
Then they got the better of Creature, and Creature deserves the well even more.
Creature says, and stares up at Harry with desperation in his eyes.
Creature is sorry, but Harry Potter does not understand the severity of Creature's crimes. It is Creature's job to sound the call. It is Creature's job to protect the house. Creature failed, and the house is wounded, and the master is wounded, and Creature should be wounded too.
Creature is wounded, Harry reminds him gently, because Draco looks pale and ill and vaguely panicked again. There's not really any reason for him to have to deal with this, since Harry can. He holds up his wand, wiggles it a little. What about this? You let me fix you up. Hold on, don't yell yet. And then you can go get Master Draco's spare wand for him, because that will be a big help. And I'm sure after that the house would probably really like it if you talk to it, or commune with it. Or look, whatever. I don't really know the right words for, all of that, but I'm sure it would like it, Harry adds, his voice having grown very uncertain by now. He'd been sort of going on the theory that people experiencing heartache need something to do. It's one of Hermione's, and it's turned out to be pretty true over the years, actually a number of times, but he's not sure it's going to work after such a weak finish. There's a bit of silence, and then, croakily, but not sobbing anymore, Creature says,
Okay, Harry Potter.
He submits without argument to Harry's healing spells and vanishes with his customary crack the minute Harry is done.
Commune with him? Draco says, clearly entertained. Oh, piss off, Harry mutters.
A little embarrassed, even if it's kind of worth it to see some light in Draco's eyes. It's not like I know what they get up to, I just figured.
No, it was good, Draco says. I mean, funny, don't get me wrong, but I usually can't get him to let one of those guild spirals go that quickly.
Harry shrugs. Creature and I go back a long time, he says and winces. Not totally in a good way. Sirius was kind of, and then I was kind of, well, and then he was kind of, but it wasn't his fault, really. I think I might have done what he did too, now that I know what I know.
Was any of that supposed to make sense to me? Draco says, exacerbated now. Or are you just talking to yourself?
I guess what I was saying, Harry says, a little pointedly, that sometimes you've got a lot of history with someone, they hear things a bit differently from you than they might from other people. Draco's eyes widen slightly, but before he can reply, Creature cracks back into the room, holding Draco's hawthorn wand.
Thank you, Creature,
Draco says. He is, Harry notes, very pointedly not looking at Harry. Harry does not blame him. He wouldn't be looking at himself either if he were in Draco's position.
Please let me know if there's anything you need, all right?
Creature makes a little wailing sound, but then he nods and vanishes again, leaving Harry and Draco to sit in silence for a long moment. So, Harry says at last, you did get it. It was maybe 2 years after the war when Harry found the wand. It was in a trunk of things he'd packed away 6 days after the Battle of Hogwarts. All the books and mementos and tools he'd associated back then with fighting Voldemort. He hadn't wanted to look at them, hadn't wanted to touch or see them, hadn't felt like he even deserved to use them when so many were dead and he was alive. It had helped weirdly for a while, keeping those things locked away. It felt like a small penance that made the act of walking around, of breathing, ever so slightly more manageable. Then he'd he'd forgotten about them, not to put too fine a point on it. They were out of sight and out of mind, and when he did eventually stumble across the trunk shrunk down and hidden in the very back of his spice cupboard, it didn't hurt so much to look at all of it. He felt a bit guilty, though, when he pulled out the hawthorn wand and remembered who it belonged to. They weren't anything back then, Harry and Draco, except what they'd always been. Childhood rivals, and people who inexplicably kept saving each other from horrible death, and the only two living witnesses to the time Harry nearly accidentally committed murder in a bathroom, which was another thing he felt guilty about. He'd spoken for Draco at his trial because it was the right thing to do, and because Draco really had played a part, however small, in turning the tide of the war, and a little because the idea of Draco locked away in Azkaban made Harry feel something. Unsettled, discomfited, unbalanced something. They'd seen each other in the hallway that day, after Draco was acquitted, their eyes locking for a second through the crowd that poured out of the courtroom. Harry thought about walking over, saying something, but in the end, he hadn't been able to figure out what. Anyway, that was the last time Harry had even seen Draco when he found the wand, and by that point he and Ginny were right in the middle of breaking up. That was why he was cleaning out the spice cabinets in the first place. She kept insisting he'd taken all his cooking shit back from hers already, and Harry didn't want to believe it. Wanted to be petty and stupid and insist that he'd gone through everything and determined she was holding onto his paprika or something. It was stupid, and he felt stupid about it, and then he found the wand and felt stupid about that too, and just didn't have it in him to track Draco down and give it back properly. It was kind of selfish and shitty of Harry, because he knew the wand probably wouldn't work right unless they did the whole whatever, the allegiances thing, but, well, he figured it had been 2 years and Draco had almost certainly found another wand, and it wasn't Harry's job to make sure this one performed for him the way it once did. He figured just giving it back would have to be enough. He chucked it in a box, and then, because he did still feel a little guilty because he couldn't help himself, he wrote a little note that said, "Here, sorry. If you have any issues, please contact me. HP." With his address scrawled at the bottom. Then he gave the box to the Oromerum because they could find anybody and went on with his bloody life. Draco never got back to him. He never flew or owled, not even to say that the wand wasn't working right anymore, which had to be the case, Harry knew. It drove him quietly mad for about 6 months, wondering if Draco was just going to pop up one day, wondering why he hadn't. Then he decided not to think about it anymore, and he pretty much hasn't since. It's becoming very clear to him now, though, that what he long since decided was the most likely option, to wit that Draco had simply not gotten his package, and has thought all this time that Harry had maybe dropped the wand in the Thames or something, is not what happened at all. Draco doesn't say anything for several long moments, just turns the wand over and over between his fingers. It's strange to see. Harry's gotten so used to the dogwood one he carries now that he'd forgotten the way the slightly darker ward looks in Draco's hand. For a second, Harry almost expects him, oh, he doesn't know, cast jelly legs or something at him. Then Draco clears his throat and looks at Harry, something wry and almost apologetic in his twisted little smile. And Harry is too consumed with trying to figure out the man he is now to dwell on the child he once was.
"I did think about writing, you know,"
Draco says. He rolls the wand between the palms of his hands and sighs.
"I started to even, a couple of times, but I couldn't. I didn't know what I would even say after the trial and—"
He trails off, and Harry takes pity on him after a second and nods. He knows what Draco means. He means after the trial and the fiend fire, and the incident at the manor, and the incident in the bathroom, and Dumbledore and Narcissa and Snape, and all the other stuff that don't ever really talk about. He means after the war, and Harry doesn't need him to drag all that up, especially not tonight. It's long over. It won't change anything now.
"I think maybe I would have if it wasn't for the house," Draco admits. "Blasted wand never did cast quite the same, and I always rather wanted to ask you about that, but I figured you didn't know it was me that bought this place. I kind of did my best to make sure you wouldn't find out while I was buying it, and then after, I mean, it would have been easy enough for you to figure it out if you wanted to, and when I got the wand, I just kind of assumed you hadn't." He shrugs, looking uncomfortable. "I thought, Pandora's box, you know." For a second, Harry wants to say that he doesn't. For a second, Harry wants to snap. "No, Malfoy, I've actually got no idea, but thanks for assuming I would have been reflexively horrible to you.
It's great to hear that your opinion of me was so high." For a second, Harry wants to stand up and walk out of this house and just take a couple of fucking breaths or something, because sometimes Draco is so frustrating that it's all Harry can do not to tear all his own hair out. Harry can't believe he hasn't mentioned it over this month and change they've spent getting to know each other, and if he's honest, it hurts a little. Not that Draco hadn't said anything when they were 19 and idiots, but that he hasn't said anything now, when they were 25 and still idiots probably, but older ones. But then Harry looks at Draco, the unhappy slant to his mouth, the way his eyes are looking anywhere but at Harry, and realizes Draco is telling him right now. This is Harry's opportunity not to do what Draco was afraid of in the first place. "Oh, I get it," Harry says. Draco whips his head up to glare at him at once, and Harry even laughs a little, shaking his head. "What, you suspicious little freak? I'm not mollycoddling you or whatever. Stop looking at me like that. I mean it. I get it. I almost didn't send it to you, and I definitely wouldn't have if I don't know, bought Malfoy Manor and turned it into a restaurant or something." Draco rolls his eyes, but he looks relieved. "Malfoy Manor would make a terrible restaurant, Potter. The layout is all wrong. It's far too large, and it wasn't for sale anyway." Harry shrugs a shoulder. "Still, it's fine. It was a long time ago." He pauses and then a little awkward adds, "I do, probably know why it never worked the same way again, though." Draco raises one eyebrow at the corner of his mouth. "Do tell." Harry figures it'll be a lot easier to just show him, so he offers Draco his own wand, holds his other hand out to pull him up. "Trade me for a second." After a long wary look, Draco complies. The hawthorn wand feels good in Harry's hand, an old familiar friend. It still thinks of him as its master, not Draco, and Harry enjoys the feeling just for a moment, knowing that it will be the last time. "Disarm me," Harry says. "One of your eyes is very slightly larger than the other one," says Draco. Harry blinks. It takes him a second to recognize a self-satisfied expression on Draco's face, then a second more to actually get the joke. When he does, he groans, rolls his eyes, and waves at the hawthorn wand in the air a little despairingly. "For fuck's sake, Malfoy, I meant. Expelliarmus," Draco says, eyes glittering, because he's never missed an opportunity in his life to be an annoying little git, and Harry shouldn't have expected him to start now. And Harry can almost feel its allegiance tug loose from his fingertips with it, over to Draco where it belongs. Draco snatches it out of the air like a snatch. He tosses Harry back his own wand without even looking at him, says, as to himself, "Could it really be that simple?" and throws a fire into the grate with a curious-sounding incendio. Flames burst merrily into life, and Draco bursts into laughter, the first genuine laugh Harry's heard from him all night. "I'm sorry," Draco says. The sensation is just so strange. It's like being 15 again." Then he looks at Harry, and quieter, his smile going small and a little wry, adds, "Well, not quite." Harry grins back at him, broad and easy, and laces his fingers behind his head, settles back in his chair. "What are you saying, Malfoy? I mean, what, did you not like me when we were teenagers or something? That's hurtful, you know. I had nothing but kind and wholesome things to say about you." "I don't like you now, Potter," Draco says, clearly trying for obnoxiously earnest, but laughing on it a little. "I find you appalling in every aspect. Your manners, your personality, your living conditions, your hair. The whole operation is tits up, and I can't believe I socialized with you. In short, egots, alas, etc." "Did 15-year-old you say egots a lot?" Harry wonders aloud. "I mean, 1,500-year-old you, sure, that would make sense." "You genuinely and without reservation are such a complete horror," Draco tells him, but he doesn't bother to hide a smile when he says it, and doesn't look away for a hanging second when Harry meets his eyes. They sit in silence for a good while after that, just kind of decompressing, Harry thinks, from the whole night. It's nice. Usually Harry starts to feel a little antsy if a period of quiet goes on too long. Sure, he's supposed to be doing something, saying something. Sure, he's messing the whole thing up somehow by missing some cue everyone but him knows. With Draco just now, it's like sitting in a room alone, but better. It's a bit like sitting in the Gryffindor common room, actually, late at night when no one who was still around was actually trying to talk. Harry used to sit and watch the fire for hours on nights when he couldn't sleep, listening to the sounds of his classmates sneaking to and from each other's dormitories, or the scratches of their quills on last-minute homework. He looks at Draco, whose legs are stretched out in front of him, his head tipped back against his chair, and his eyes on the dance of the flames. He doesn't look panicked or resigned or affectless or sorrowful or anything else horrible just now. He looks comfortable, calm, maybe the calmest Harry's seen him look this whole month. Maybe the calmest Harry's ever seen him look. Harry thinks about being 15 and hating Malfoy more than anything. Hating Malfoy so much it burned and hissed beneath his skin. He wonders if maybe Draco wasn't doing this too. Back then, down in the Slytherin dungeons. If some nights it hadn't just been the two of them at opposite ends of the castle, sitting up alone with the fire. It's a ridiculous thought, a silly one. He doesn't ask Draco about it, because he doesn't want to find out that he's wrong.
We should call the Aurors, Draco says eventually. To report, you know, all of these unpleasant happenings, criminals on the loose and such.
Yeah, Harry says and sighs. And you still need St. Mungo's. Are you sure you're...
Oh, just call your bloody Aurors, Potter.
Draco snaps before Harry can get the word ready out of his mouth, so Harry shrugs and sends a Patronus. It's only about 20 seconds before another one sweeps back in, and Harry blinks at it, a second, frankly astonished at the response time, before he realizes that it's a Jack Russell's terrier, and runs.
Harry, it says, sounding furious, where in the bloody fog are you? Hermione's been attacked. Come to St. Mungo's the minute you get this.
It dissolves in the air between him and Draco, who's staring at him, eyes wide. For the second time tonight, Harry doesn't think. He stands, grabs Draco by one of his wrists, and apparates them both out of the house. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of What We Pretend We Can't See by gyzym, read by LMX Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and AO3.